Born in Cleveland, raised a hillbilly. What's your story? Welcome to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Here's your host, Sarah Blossom Ware.
Welcome back to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Blossom Ware. The chapter that I'll read today is called Granny's Inferno. I read Dante's Inferno for the first time in my freshman English class in college. I was, and still am, absolutely intrigued by the author's choices of punishment to coincide with different types of sins. There were 3 types of punishments at Granny's house. These involved a fly swatter, a bed, and a toilet. The latter was by far the most dreaded. In Dante's Inferno, the punishments fit the crimes. In Granny's Inferno, the punishments were doled out randomly according to how many kids were implicated, but they were equally interesting choices. One form of punishment was a good old-fashioned whooping with the fly swatter. This was announced by Granny very matter-of-factly. "I am going to whoop you with the fly swatter." Then she would proclaim to another child, "Go and get me the fly swatter." This task was always carried out enthusiastically. Getting whooped with the fly swatter never hurt. Granny took it very seriously, and she was plenty mad when she wielded it, but we all thought it was funny. Corey's middle name is Sean. Granny refused to pronounce Sean, S-E-A-N, as Sean, because that was completely ridiculous. Everyone knows that S-E-A-N is pronounced seen. I remember one afternoon when Corey got into some mischief that warranted the fly swatter. Granny chased him around the front yard with the red fly swatter yelling, "Corey Seen, you get back here! I am going to whoop you with the fly swatter." When the whooping finally commenced, she broke her fly swatter on Corey Seen's butt. I bet she never seen that coming. We all laughed so hard, Corey hardest of all. Another form of punishment was to be sent under Granny's bed. It was a small twin bed covered with a tan bedspread that had short tassels along the edges that hung down nearly to the floor. The accused had to lie down and butt scoot under the bed. Then Granny would start talking smack. "I just seen a huge spider under there yesterday evening." We didn't believe her, but it was so boring. At least the fly swatter was quick. I twisted those tassels, I braided those tassels, I tied those tassels. Those tassels were the only thing going. Now I wonder why we never thought preemptively to roll a toy car or a ball or something under there. The final and most dreaded form of punishment at Granny's house was to sit on the pot, a.k.a. the toilet. Now don't let the presence of a pot fool you. Granny didn't have indoor plumbing either. This punishment was usually reserved for times when more than one child was at fault. You go get under the bed, and you go sit on the pot. It was a loathsome experience. The only saving grace was that the pot was near the bed, so it was sometimes possible to whisper back and forth. I remember one time when I was happily reminiscing with a friend about being whooped with a fly swatter and forced under a bed and onto a toilet as punishment. I was caught off guard by the shocked reaction. "Whoa, that's child abuse." I never thought of it that way before, and I still don't. Kids know when they're loved. So let's reintroduce our discussion panel members that have been with us for the past few podcasts. So this will be the final podcast that we have this discussion panel. So please introduce yourselves with your name and your 6-word summary.
Hi, I'm Azka, and mine would be living between 2 cultures in one society.
Hello, this is George. I am Sarah's brother. My 6-word summary is most at home in the woods.
Okay, thank you. So you can listen to a few podcast back if you're interested in hearing some more about Azka and George and their backgrounds and their current walks in society. All right, so this chapter is Granny's Inferno. So this chapter was all about Granny's kind of unconventional methods of punishment that she had for us. She was our babysitter, but she was really our granny. Our grandparents lived in Ohio, and so that's very far from Arkansas. And so Granny we saw every day almost, and so she really did take on this grandmotherly role completely.
As much a part of our upbringing as our parents probably, really.
Yeah, we were there a lot. I mean, I remember like watching Dynasty and, Dallas and things that were, and, my husband's like, those were like on at 9 or 10 at night. I'm like, yeah, we were there all the time. Like, but anyway, she was a big part of our growing up for sure. Okay, so she had these kind of really different forms of punishment that probably most people did not have, even in the South, maybe growing up. But I'm just wondering then, Azka, obviously George had the same kind of punishments that I did, but
just more often.
That's true. I was really good. But no. So Azka, what kind of preferred forms of punishment, if you don't mind sharing, did you have growing up, and like, did you agree with those, disagree? Kind of, do you have a different perspective now that you're older?
Let's see. I guess when I was younger, my mom was mostly in the kitchen, like always like cooking and stuff. And like one of her favorite forms of punishment was like if you did something, she would always have like her spoon with her. So like she would just smack you with her spoon, or like if you would avoid that, she would like have her shoe and she would throw her shoe. You would avoid it.
A shoe, okay.
Yeah, she would throw her shoe, but like the more traditional form of punishment was kind of like an emotional type of punishment, I guess. Like it would make you feel like you did mess up and kind of like, what did you do wrong type of thing, and not like, oh, you messed up, it's okay, but more like you messed up, you hurt your parents, like their feelings, like, and kind of avoid those mistakes later on. Like we didn't really have behavioral issues, like we weren't crazy kids, like we were well behaved, but like sometimes you did mess up. And even as we grew older, it wasn't like, oh, go to your room or stand in the corner, like it's a timeout, like very controlled. It was more like, you messed up, like what are you gonna do now type of thing. It was more like, it was like a more mature way of punishment. Like we weren't really like crying kids and stuff and all that. But I know like my dad, like we would take road trips sometimes, and like if you were like really bad, he'd be like, you can get out of the car. Like he would stop on the road and be like, get out of the car now. And it's like, Dad, we're in like the middle of like Kansas, like do you want us to get out of the car, really? And it's kind of more like if you mess up type of thing, like no, you're doing wrong, like your parents are mad at you, like you messed up, that sort of thing.
So like guilting and like making you self-reflect.
Yeah. And would I choose these methods for my kids? Yes and no. Mind manipulation's always fun, I guess.
Also a skill.
It's also a skill. And I think it's important for kids to realize that they did mess up. Because, like, you can give them timeouts and send them to their room all you want, like, especially in today's society. Like, if a kid goes to the room, all their fun things are in their room,
It's true.
So, I mean, going to your room seems pretty fun.
Well, I try it all. I try guilt. I try, like, go to the corner. Like, yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure what the solution is.
Maybe you're
not sure
nice.
What works.
Maybe you're nice, Dr. Ware.
I am not nice.
I don't think that's it.
I'm not nice. It's a facade. Okay, so George, I am wondering if you have adopted any of Granny's unconventional methods in any of your kind of ways of not punishing. Punishing is a bad word, but anyway, of trying to sculpt and mold Ella.
So the short answer would be no, but here's the big difference. My child's a little angel, and I was a little shit. So I can't remember a single time, literally not a single time of me being punished as a child where I'd think back and think, I didn't deserve that. I completely deserved it every time. It was never anything, abusive. But yeah, my child's been really easy to deal with. Now we'll see how the teenage years go, I guess. But up to this point, if I just raised my voice to her, she'd feel bad and cower and never struck her in my life. I've never laid a hand on her in any form. But she's just a much better child than I was.
That was my dad as well. Like, my dad never struck me or anything, and my brother as well. But like, if your dad's mad at you, you feel bad, like straight off the bat, like you messed up. But my dad's such a sweetheart. Like, hours later, he'll come check on you and like see if you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a softie. But again, if I had 4 kids running around, I'd probably have to take a different stance and harden up a little bit on my parenting. But
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Like, I had big ideas in my head before I had 4 children of like, I'm logical. We're just gonna talk. Like, this did not work out for my kids.
No reasoning.
I see that happening with my brothers, especially. My mom's like, "What's wrong? This and this." Nothing. Like the typical, like, nothing's wrong, Mom. And then there's so much wrong, and like it's just, I see that. It's hard to communicate with kids, hands down.
Yes. Well, I have to say, okay, of these 3 forms of punishment, so we whipped with the fly swatter, we got sent under the bed, and we had to go sit on the pot. I have done 2 of those 3, but I'm not going to say which ones.
Yeah, you missed going and picking out your own switch though at Granny's. That was a good one too.
Yeah,
Similar to the fly swatter, but it was a notch up. Kicked it up a notch by making you go pick your own form of punishment off a tree.
I sort of remember that. Now,
it probably happened to me a lot more than it happened to you.
Who whittled it? Did somebody whittle it, or you just got whacked with it?
I just got whacked with it. She might take the small leaves and branches off.
I remember
just because
whittling.
it would be a better switch then. But it sounds so abusive, but it really wasn't. It's not like she was beating us till we had welts on it. It was just more of the fear factor.
And it was embarrassing.
It was embarrassing too.
Yeah, there were a lot of kids there, like Corey and Josh, Vickery, and
laughing at you.
Yeah, it was always funny when someone else was getting always. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like with parenting now, like you see kids and it's like they're running around. Oh, I think there was like an article recently, like this restaurant owner like screamed at the little kid because the little kid was crying like for the longest time or something. It was it was really interesting because it sparked like a huge debate, like on Facebook especially, like who is right, the parents or the restaurant owner. And personally, I found both of them were wrong. But like everyone was talking about how a lot of the times people let their kids cry, like like they let them cry in places and stuff, and it disturbs everyone. And I just found it funny because like if we pulled something like that, you messed up. Like the glare would come and like I'll deal with you later type of thing would come. You just stop right there. I don't know.
And the anticipation's always worse than the actual punishment.
It's very true.
Okay, so I have there's a statement that I didn't think a whole lot about. I mean, it is intentional, but I've had a lot of comments from people about my statement at the end of this chapter when my friend was just like, "Wow, I can't even believe you're like saying like you got all these punishments and like there's such child abuse." And I mean, it was just shocking to me. It was like I got smacked in the face. Like, what are you saying to me? And like, so I just have this statement, kids know when they're loved. And I mean, I don't know how else to encompass that, but Granny had rules, and I mean, she was the law, and she seemed, outwardly, her voice was very shrill, and, she kind of yelled some, but we always, at least I always felt like she would fight to the death for me, like totally, like I always felt protected and cared for. So I'm wondering if you have some specific situations that you can describe that you just specifically this, like I remember that was a safe place or a good feeling, like from my parents or my grandparents. I don't know.
I mean, I had the same feelings. Again, I think Granny was probably a little harsher character to me, again, because I was such a little shit, and you were a lot sweeter. But yeah, I always felt protected and loved by her, and our parents as well. So, I always felt like, even though we had a not unconventional, I guess, upbringing, always knew that they loved us and they took care of us. Probably didn't appreciate it as much when I was a child as I do now, looking back, because as a kid, you're more self-centered, I think, and you don't see the big picture. But one quick little story I remember. So somehow, even though we were little hillbillies, we ended up starting to play golf at a young age. Still do it in a hillbilly way. My dad would still wear blue jeans and work boots while he did it, but it was fun. And I remember this guy hitting into us, and we're coming really close to hitting me in the head with a golf ball behind us. My dad picked it up, threw it back at the guy, and basically threatened to kill him, and which would scare some people. But I was just like, yeah, my dad's got my back. I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, Dad. Yeah, he sometimes threatens people.
Yeah. I relate to it, like what George said earlier about how, like, you messed up as a kid, and now that you think about it, you totally deserved it. Like, your parents have to deal with so much, and, like, your kids mess up, but as a kid, you don't know that you messed up. You think that, oh, your parents are at fault for yelling at you or making you feel bad. But now that I think about it, I'm so glad my parents punished me and made me feel guilty and realize I was in the wrong, because I would be so bad if I didn't realize that. And, like, people would say it's child abuse, but in a sense, like, it never went that far, like, you had welts and stuff. Like, it was more like a more emotional trauma, I guess. Like, you would feel it, but you would know, like, that you messed up. And that was, like, the biggest thing. Yep. And I think that's really important to understand. Because, like, there's only so much you can do verbally. Like, you can yell at them as much as you want, but sometimes you need that smack in the face, literally, to, like, realize that you are a terrible kid.
Let them know that threat's real.
Yeah, basically.
Well, or we had time to think about our actions under the bed or on the pot.
A lot of time to think.
Yeah, we were there a while. Like, I don't remember how long.
I think she'd forget sometimes.
Yeah. There are too many other things going on. Too many other kids around.
Dr. Ware, do you think you'd be different if you didn't have these forms of punishment with Granny?
You know what? I actually kind of relate her way of love, but with harshness, I guess, or I don't know. It's kind of how I teach. I don't know if you kind of get that, but I feel like I'm like come across, especially at first, like come across and be like, you better not ever cheat. You've heard the stories,
Yeah.
They're all true. Like, like come across like, but in the end, and I always think I'm a jerk. Like, this is my perception of how I teach. I'm like a jerk. But in the end, I'm always surprised because a lot of my students like tell me really nice things. And like I remember one person at Benedictine like said you were a really nice teacher, and I said, don't you go spreading that around. I'll like get fired. No, I'm not. Don't tell your friends. But I always find it interesting because I feel like I'm kind of a jerk and I'm pretty hard teacher, but I somehow the students kind of like me sometimes, which is, I don't know, maybe kind of like Granny. Like I had kind of that background of tough love. I don't know. Or you think I'm a pushover?
No, I think it's in the middle. Like you just relate to us well. Like a lot of times there's like a student-teacher relationship where the teacher feels like the need to like, it's like a power conflict, I guess. But like with you, like you relate to us and like you understand like the students' struggles and like you adapt to us, and I feel like that's like the coolest thing ever. Like sometimes like in genetics lab, like we had issues like where you knew we had like a ton of tests and stuff coming up, and like you'd be kind of lenient but you would be harder on some areas. Like we had to turn in labs, we had to do this, but like it's okay if something happens, and I feel like that's really important, especially like at the college level, because a lot of professors don't understand, and that's why a lot of students like you. It's like tough love
I am
in a
flexible.
good way.
Yeah, I do. Actually, that's interesting because I do find I'm like, I always think about like, I do, depending on the class and the makeup of the class, sometimes I'll do something in one semester that I won't necessarily do in another semester, but it's not like it's easier or harder. It's just, different.
I think that's really commendable. And that's why a lot of students do like you, even though you can be hard at times. It's because you care and you relate to us. Like, it's not like that power complex where you're always a professor. Like, we can come talk to you. We can always ask for help, even though, like, we have no idea what's going on. And I feel like I asked you recombination so many times, or pedigrees like 20 times. I still don't get pedigrees, but to an extent I do. And it's just, I think that approachable mentality is really key because, like, we know, like, we can get in trouble, but we can still always come to you. And I think that's commendable.
Thank you. I'm very humbled. No, but I mean, I feel like Granny, like, I guess I kind of fashioned my parenting and my like teaching. I mean, she was really influential, let's say. I mean, very influential. Yep. A very, I mean, unusual to say maybe, but a very powerful woman. I mean, she was not at all like powerful in society or stature or like in a lot of ways.
No one messed with her though.
Yeah.
Of any male, female, no.
No, she meant business.
Yeah.
She meant business for sure. Yeah, but she had no money, but she gave anybody anything, kind of thing. But yeah, my granny, I love her. All right. So let's go to, it's a little bit switching gears, but this is a question that I always ask for in every podcast session as far as like per discussion members. So my mom came up with this question for the first set of podcasts, and I love the answers that I get, so I always bring it back. So there was an earlier podcast, or there's a chapter when I was talking about how when my dad came back from a walk with my brothers, they didn't have shoes on. They had shoes on when they came back, they were barefoot, and my mom could not ever get the story out of any of them. Not my dad, not my brothers. So finally, like maybe 5 years ago, he told her the real story. So this is the question. Is there a time that you did not know the whole story about something until much later?
So yeah, those tennis shoes will be uncovered by an archaeologist sometime in the, a couple thousand years from now, maybe.
Petrified.
Yeah. But so one that comes to mind, and one that I still am not sure I fully understand what happened, was we had a pond behind our house, and we were way out in the country, and this pond had some of the biggest snakes you would ever see. And I remember finding two big water moccasins in there, and my dad wasn't home, went and got Mom, and she came out with the 12-gauge shotgun and shot both of those snakes in the head while I watched. And I mean, so and now that I'm older and I I've studied up a little bit, they say water moccasins in Arkansas don't get more than 5 maybe 5, maybe 6 feet long at the most, and these snakes had to be 10 feet long and as big around as my arm. Huge water moccasins. And well, the first thing I thought was, my mom's a badass. Don't be confused by her soft-spoken nature. That was the moment I realized she could really take care of herself.
Yeah.
She is tough. But to this day, I wish I had some kind of picture or video evidence of how big these water moccasins actually were, to see if they were actually as big as I see them in my head. So maybe I'll just never know the answer to that one. But
yeah, well, I mean, I gotta add, like, do you remember the walking sticks?
Oh, yeah, massive. Just
crazy,
ridiculously big.
Mutant-sized things out there.
Yeah, like 1.5 to 2 feet long.
Man. Nasty, fat bodies. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yep. People don't believe me on that either,
No, and the tarantulas, like those plate-sized tarantulas.
Oh, yeah, big tarantulas, yes.
Oh, wow.
Weird stuff out there.
Yep.
Weird stuff.
What I would add to that is about like coming home and Mom not knowing the whole story. There's an unspoken code among siblings and the dad that you don't share, you don't tell mom. There has been many, like, my dad and I would take us out, like, me and my brothers, and, like, we would come back, and my mom would be like, oh, where'd you go? What'd you do? And we're like, oh, nothing major, nothing happened. We just, like, look at our dad, and we just start laughing, because, like, we know, like, we don't want to get our dad in trouble, because, like, when my mom goes off, like, she's, like, your typical, like, oh, she'll keep talking, and she'll keep complaining about it. 10 minutes later, like, she'll keep talking about it, you know, and it's just, like, we would just avoid that and kind of be like, oh, nothing happened, nothing at all.
So she doesn't ever know the whole story.
Not really.
That's
No.
good, though. Probably for the best.
Yeah. You know, most of the time is my little brother. He tends to, like, tell me the whole story because I'm the older sister and I can come save him or come do something and help him out and take him wherever he needs to go and do that. Like, one time he needed something from the store. He didn't go to my mom. He went to me. He's like, can you take me? And I'm like, okay. And so it's like with my mom, like, when she starts talking, she keeps on talking. So it's like, I'm really practical, so it's like just get to the point type of person. So it was really funny to see how, like, with my little brother, everyone actually among my siblings, we avoid telling her like the whole story, because like if we continue on, we will hear all of it, and we don't want to hear all of it. Just stop right there.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
Sometimes, as a parent, I have to say sometimes that's true. Okay, so, all right, I think this is the last one here for today. Describe. I would like to hear your description of a favorite memory with a grandparent or a babysitter, you know, or with a parent. And why is that memory still sticking with you, you know, 30 years later or something?
20.
You know? Okay,
Right.
20 to 40 years later. Yes. Azka?
Sure. Memory-wise, I would say this would be in Pakistan. I would actually talk about my uncle, my mom's sister's husband, and he had this Robin Blue scooter. So they don't really have cars in Pakistan because, like, the roads are unstable, so it's more like motorcycles and scooters. And he would always take me on this Robin Blue scooter everywhere, and he would always take us out to ice cream. And like years later when I was like, I think 16, and he still had the Robin Blue scooter, and I was so excited because I was like, I love this thing. It was from the 90s and I would just love it. And he ended up passing away, but they still kept the Robin Blue scooter, and I'm like, I'm gonna buy it, I'm gonna get it here. And I love that thing, and it's just like that scooter is like a symbol of like my childhood, you know. I relate to that, like not other material goods like books and stuff, but it's like that one scooter is like kind of like that symbol of like being Pakistani, being an American, and kind of like relating to my youth. So I think that's the coolest thing ever.
Nice.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so you know, one that comes to mind for me, I have so many good memories from Arkansas and from Granny and our parents, but one that came to mind for me was actually from Cleveland, which is where our grandparents lived, and we would go back there for a couple weeks every summer. So we spent a lot of time in Cleveland. Our grandma and grandpa on my mom's side, grandma and grandpa Pridgetel, lived in downtown Cleveland, East 66 St. Clair Avenue, downtown Cleveland. And so their neighborhoods were very, segregated isn't necessarily the right word, but you'd have your own you had your Slovenian community, and you have your Polish community, and you have your Italian community, and it was very, you know, kind of separated.
Like Chicago.
Yeah, in Chicago, right, and that's something that's kind of going away, and there's a lot of gentrification, and I struggle with, you know, people say, you know, we want everyone to be integrated, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have those little pockets of communities. And you know, I remember Grandpa taking me down to the Slovenian National Home on St. Clair, which was their big meeting place, and it, you know, had a big room in front where they would have dinners and things like that. But if you took the alley around back and you went down this little alley, down these steps, and underneath the place was the Slovenian bar, which was awesome. It was like a secret club.
I never went there.
Uh-huh.
I've been to a Slovenian home, but not this.
So the bar was, underneath the place, and I remember Grandpa would take me down there and show me off, like, he was so proud of me and say, hey, this is my grandson. He's here from Arkansas. And everyone was like, hey, and set me up with a root beer and a bowl of peanuts. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And that's something that I think is we're maybe losing in a lot of places. But anyway, just great memory, and it made me feel really special.
Aw, yeah, I didn't get to do that.
I think everyone has their own unique memory,
right?
With each relative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Last final thoughts. Anything?
I think this is super cool, especially with life being so fast now. It's so much fun to dwell on the past and kind of see like how times have changed. And it kind of makes you reflect on, like, me, if I ever get married or have kids, I know this is the way I would want to treat them, kind of like that homegrown mentality that I really respect, and kind of like have the blend of the urban life and the rural life as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's made me think about a lot of things from my childhood that I haven't necessarily thought about much in the recent past. So it's been a lot of fun for me. Take a little trip down memory lane. Yeah.
Makes you appreciate your parents a lot more.
Absolutely,
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I've a lot of people have commented that, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that in so long. Like, that was cool.
Yep.
So and I find it interesting even, but that sometimes it's really you have to really plan it, or like be asked the question to go back there, and it's, I don't know what's the word I'm trying to say, I don't know, intentional. That's the word I'm looking for. Sometimes you wouldn't think that memories would have to be intentional, but sometimes it seemed, at least through this kind of experiment, that it sometimes that's the case, and then then you start thinking about a lot of things, again, or a lot of people, a lot of memories. But no, it's tons of fun for me. So yeah, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Okay, and thank you for listening to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Tune in next time to hear about what Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus looks like. Until then, dream big and have fun.